This channel supports 8-Bit Salute and Operation Supply Drop. Please help us raise money to help support our men and women in service throughout the world. Operation Supply Drop, making fun where there is none. What up, everybody? This your boy Black Magus, and I guess everybody else is doing it, so I'm going to throw in my 2 cents literally, because it's probably what YouTube's going to give me for this video, on Battlefield 1. Now, I'm probably going to do this from a different perspective than a lot of people, whereas a lot of people are probably going to spend more of their time talking about the game itself. I think I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about the historical aspects that I see within this trailer. Now, if you haven't seen the trailer, first of all, where have you been? If you are a serious gamer, if you're a casual gamer, I can understand. You probably don't have the time, or you probably aren't, spending the time that a lot of people like me or other YouTubers who do this do looking at this stuff. That being said, I will put the link in the description for the trailer. Trailer's hot. Trailer's really, really hot. Seriously. It's funny too, because I tweeted that D.I.C.E really knows how to make World War I look exciting. The reason I say that is because one of my reservations with this game had been that the rumors of them putting it within the World War I era. How would it run? How would it be paced? What will they do to make the action exciting to modern gamers? Because for those who may not know a lot on World War I, World War I was a very brutal, methodical war where it took a while before modern war mechanism came into play. A lot of the things that we see in World War II games and in the World War II movies didn't exist in World War I. Things like tanks, the style of airplanes, aircraft carriers, those were things that were kind of worked on and eventually came into play in World War I, whereas the majority of World War I was a trench warfare, soldiers against soldiers. It wasn't a gentleman's war like back in Civil War and stuff like that. They modernized war to the point where people didn't do that skirmish line stuff, thank God, because that to me it was kind of the dumbest way of fighting a war. I don't understand. Going over the things I've read in history, I still don't understand what made them think that. I guess they felt like it was a more honorable way of fighting with guns. I really didn't get that, but trench warfare was the thing. You had to rush lines from one trench to the next, run the risk of your soldiers being gassed, of course shot from distance, and then once you got up close, there was the brutality. A lot of hand-to-hand fighting, bayonets and things like that. Hand-to-hand fighting was a real prevalent thing in World War I. Of course, there was some hand-to-hand bayonet charges in World War II, but for the most part, with automatic rifles, machine guns, and things like that being more standard during World War II, people were less inclined to try to do bayonet charge type warfare. Like, you would rush lines, but you would rush lines to different cover, to flanking positions. You would try to your moving forward was based on finding cover. You weren't just naked running across a field like a lot of the combat in World War I broke down to, until they got to the trenches, and then all hell seriously broke loose there. And of course, without the threat of chemical warfare, which was banned after World War I, you didn't have to worry about, is my mask gonna work? Do I have my mask? Are they gonna throw some mustard gas out here? You didn't have that horrible experience to fuck with as well. But it still was a very rudimentary, brutal, nasty war. And again, things weren't as advanced as they were. So you had single shot rifles. Like, I was reading how one of the standard rifles, you got 10 shots a minute, which might sound pretty quick, especially considering when you're coming from eras where they still had to pack and load their rifles. Um, yeah, considering that in World War II, you had like much faster, you could dump like 10 shots in a matter of like 10 to 10 seconds, maybe. Yeah. Um, and then, yeah, definitely. So, those were all the things that were concerning me about Battlefield being in World War One. Now, looking at this trailer, definitely looks like they're going to um, do it justice. They're going to try to be as historically accurate as possible. If you look at the trailer, you will notice that a lot of the things that I spoke about are in the game, like the first tanks with the big treads that they had, biplanes with set up properly. Like you notice in one shot, there's a picture of the guy in the biplane, and he's kind of sitting high up on the plane in a like machine gun turret. That was something that was intentionally done because the early combat planes, the biggest problem was finding a way to fire without messing up the plane. Fire forward in particular, because when you tried to fire a gun forward, you tore up your propeller. So they actually, the way that things evolved in that was very, very ingenious. I'm not going to go into detail. I've already gone like 6 minutes just over the history of World War One, and if I keep going, this video is going to be 25-30 minutes long. But they got very inventive. That was one of the things. They put it up high so that it could avoid the propeller. Try to keep it from hitting the propeller. So that's why you see that turret like that. They kind of made like 2-man planes, things like that. Eventually they figured out how to make it so one man can pilot and fire forward. And basically your aiming would just be wherever you point the plane, like modern warfare became, that's where you're shooting. And you to no or little risk to damaging the propeller, and ended up making yourself go into a tailspin and crash. But they showed that. They showed cannons. The first artillery, like serious artillery. I mean, cannons had already been around for a while, but the first like heavy artillery that evolved eventually to things like howitzers and stuff like that. You got to see the brutality that I was talking about. The guy running up on the field with the shovel, smacking the shit out of dude. Yeah, you had to get into a lot of like scraps like that, and do what you had to do. It was violent. And I think that's where they're going to kind of capture the type of combat that they hope will appeal, is mostly with the melee, because in that trailer I didn't see a huge amount of gunplay. Like you saw machine guns, which again, later years machine guns became more like carryable, Tommy guns, and I believe like were first used in World War One at the end, and other repeaters were brought on at near the last couple of years of the war. So yeah, you will see some of that stuff, but I think the melee, or the more up close and personal type of combat, is kind of where they're going. The rushing the lines, the melee stuff. I think that's where they're going to try to draw you in. I'm curious to see how that's going to work in the multiplayer. I don't think I would mind the close quarter combat, but I don't know how some people may feel. But you just have to see, because most shooters that you see these days, part of the appeal, of course, is that you have the boots on the ground, or the high pace, run around, able to shoot, especially shoot from distances, and connect. It's not necessarily a super engaging type of thing, and I think
this is going to be more engaging. The only game I can think of that really does that well, where close quarter combat is a thing, is the Gear series, and it's going to be interesting to see a first-person shooter adopt that Gears type of thing. Now, I'm sure there are other first-person shooters that do that, but I can't think of any of the popular ones that really do that. I mean, yeah, you have your shotguns, but it's like the shotguns is for the people who run around. You just happen to run into somebody and shoot them. This game, I feel like they kind of want you to play a more close combat style, but we'll see. We'll see, especially since they're going to have cavalry charges, because yes, horses were still in play. They did use horse cavalry. The cavalry didn't start to switch over to the mechanized tanks until the last couple of years, and even then it was a mix of both, because tanks weren't like that abundant and prevalent on the battlefield. People, they were a new invention. They weren't the dominant thing that we saw in preceding wars and things like that, you know. So yeah, but it'll be interesting to see how that multiplayer combat is going to flow. For me, the draw is definitely going to be the single player. I am definitely going to be hooked into the era, because I want to see how they shape it, how they mold it, like how they bring it to the screen. It's not like DICE is the first to do a World War I. In fact, shout out to Big Fry for reminding me there's a game called Verdun out, and I believe there's another game called French 1916 or something like that. That's a World War I game that's out. I'm a shooter. They're both shooters. So DICE isn't inventing the wheel here with this. But the thing that gets me excited is that DICE likes to show a lot of attention to detail. Say what you will about Star Wars Battlefront, but they put a lot in that brings realism to a sci-fi world. Like, you feel like you're in a Star Wars base with Battlefront. With Battlefield, from 1942 on up to the present ones, there's like always has been an element of accuracy, realism, and authentication to the gameplay. The way the guns behave, the way that the soldiers move, the responses, the vehicles, how they are used, like what they can do, and how you would use them. They like to have proper application to the weaponry in their game. So that I am very, very excited for, because it would be pretty neat to see a very accurate representation of a war era that, while it has been represented in games before, doesn't get as much love because it doesn't, I guess, have the romance as World War II has. World War II was that war that was the right war. Its story behind it, from beginning to end, was a very romantic saga, whereas World War One, it's just like hellacious. I'm sure if you were able to talk to a World War One veteran, he would. I mean, the things that people say from World War II that may seem shocking and terrible, World War One probably beats that 10 times over. That again, this is when we were coming into the more modernized era of warfare, and the mechanization of war, plus the chemical warfare. Weapons getting more brutal. The devastation of being gassed. Yeah, that was crazy. It's going to be interesting to see all of that play out, and for a history buff like me, that's going to be awesome. Now, for those who are just looking for a multiplayer experience, that's where we don't know. We don't know exactly how it's going to flow, how it's going to come off. So I'm definitely curious to see how the multiplayer is, if they're going to take liberties with reality, because I still think that you have to to have a level of authenticity. The pacing may not be as good as a World War II. It may be a little slower than a World War II game, and that may turn off some. But I don't know. I am very hopeful though after seeing this trailer because, again, DICE, they make solid shooters. So we'll see if they will be able to capture the magic in this one. But anyway, as always, you guys hit me up. Let me know what you think, and I'll holler at you later. This is your boy Black Megas, and I'm out. Deuces.